Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Cassada, and I got to tell you, I am super excited to be a part of this. It's been a really interesting couple of days. I got in on Tuesday night, so I missed some of the keynote speeches on Tuesday, but I heard they were incredible. Yesterday, I saw a couple of the keynote speeches, incredibly interesting and inspiring, and now here we are on the last day of the conference, and I've got a chance to give one myself. So it got me thinking about this idea of a keynote speech, this idea of kind of a singular presentation delivered to a conference to kind of set the tone and focus the message and the mission. And I couldn't help but think, and I've got a clicker up here, is that right? There it is. I couldn't help but think, oh no, we need the audio in this one. All right, I'm going to go back. Okay, I'll let you run it. Went the wrong way. Well, there goes my joke.
Inconceivable! You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
So, I have no idea what my legacy is going to be in manned spaceflight, but if I can convince the ISS R&D Conference to be a little bit more judicious in the term keynote, I'm going to consider it a success. So I'm sorry, I know this is the last address, probably a couple more sessions in the afternoon, but like I said, excited to be here, and I've been asked to talk about one of my least favorite topics, which in fact is me. So if it's okay, we'll talk briefly about how I got to be here today, and then we'll talk about the super cool stuff, how we train to fly in space and why we all collectively do what we do. Before I get into that, I'm going to answer the three first questions before we go any further, and those answers are no, not yet, hopefully soon, and yes, I've got tons. And those questions are, of course, have you flown in space? Oh, well then when will you? And then finally, do you have stickers? Because you only invite an astronaut to speak for two reasons. One, because they've got stickers, and the other reason is because they have videos. So I'm going to advance to this next one and start with a video that kind of highlights a lot of the training that we actually do on a day-to-day basis to get us ready to fly in space. Okay, so yeah, exactly. I just ate up 2.5 minutes, but I'm going to tell you what, for me, the goosebumps are worth it every time. Um, and of course, life is always cooler when you set it to music, but I love that one. So real quick, how did I end up here, lucky enough to be talking to everybody? I actually was born locally here in Balboa, which I kind of forgot about until I landed and looked around and went, oh yeah, this was where I was until I was about 5. But I grew up mostly in Minnesota as a Navy brat before that. And I went to a small liberal arts school in central Michigan called Albion College, which in fact was smaller than my high school. And we used to say the greatest thing about Albion is that you knew everybody. And the worst thing about Albion is that you knew everybody. But it was a great place to learn physics. It was a very intimate kind of classroom setting with some of the world's and the nation's greatest physicists in a class of 3 or maybe 4 or 5. So after Albion, I went to the University of Rochester in upstate New York, and I did my coursework up there, pursuing my PhD. And then I, in fact, moved to Chicago, and I did high energy physics at Fermilab, which is located about 25, 30 miles west of Chicago. And we'll talk about that research here in just a second. But after that is when I joined the Navy, and the map gets a little bit more confusing from there, kind of a John Madden kind of football execution, and then hopefully someday we'll get an arrow that is coming out of the screen. Hopefully we'll solve that here soon. So here's Fermilab. Fermilab is a particle accelerator. It's about 4 miles in circumference. The beam is located about 20 feet underground. And what we do is we collide protons and antiprotons. So getting protons is not all that hard. We take a hydrogen gas, we split it, and we've got hydrogen ions, and then we steal the electron, and we're left with a proton. The limiting factor really is getting antiprotons. Those are a little harder to come by. And the way we do that is just take a beam of protons, hit a target, typically tungsten, and then just kind of sift off all the garbage that comes out of that and just keep the antiprotons. But regardless, what we're doing is we are slamming protons into antiprotons. And in fact, in high school we're taught that protons and neutrons and electrons make up the atom, and that's kind of the end of the story. Of course, we learn later that there's actually a substructure to the proton and the neutron, and those are called quarks. So when I say we're colliding protons and antiprotons, it's really, we've got 3 quarks coming at 3 antiquarks, and we see a quark-quark interaction. So here's my detector when it was up. It's called the Collider Detector Facility at Fermilab. I say it's a detector. It's a synthesis of a lot of different kinds of detectors that help us just kind of identify all the stuff that comes out of that collision. And this is kind of what a collision looks like. So what we're doing is in high energy physics, we are investigating the very nature of nature itself. And so we can kind of develop this understanding at a fundamental level how the universe works. And one of the best analogies that I heard was from one of my instructors in grad school, who said it's a little bit like smashing watches. In fact, he was German, so it was smashing watches. But the idea is, if you want to know how your watch works, you're going to take a little screwdriver, you're going to take it apart, and look at the inner workings of the watch. But if you don't have a screwdriver small enough, your only other option is to take 10,000 of these watches and one at a time smash them up against the wall. And then every collision, you're going to collect all the data, characterize everything that comes out, and you're going to map backwards. And eventually, you're going to do this enough, and you're going to understand how that watch works. So that's essentially how high energy physics, at least on the experimental side, works. How does this have any bearing to what we're doing here and what we're talking about today at the conference? It's my opinion, and I think it's actually more truth, more of a fact than anything, that the effect that we have on our daily lives tends to lag frontier science by about 30 to 40 years. When I was in grad school, I had an incredibly witty buddy who was an English and history major. In fact, didn't do much of either one of those either. But he asked me to explain to him what we were doing in high energy physics. And I kind of walked through that analogy, and he stopped for a second and he said, yeah, but do I get more cable channels? And the truth is, the answer to that question is absolutely, right? 100, 150 years ago, the focus, the cutting edge science was mechanics and thermodynamics. And what was the fallout of that? Of course, the Industrial Revolution, a revolution in transportation with airplanes and cars. But it happened later. And the only reason people were looking at mechanics and thermodynamics is because they were curious. They had no direct application. Quantum mechanics is no different. We use quantum mechanics every day, even if we don't quite understand every bit of it, but we're getting there. Or maybe we never will, but it's interesting to keep looking into it. But we talked yesterday about the explosion in technology, and as that's a result of the transistor. Well, years ago, decades ago, the only way you could have a computer is if you had government money. That's the only way you're going to afford a computer that's based on vacuum tubes. But now, because some people were super interested in quantum mechanics and they built a transistor, which they didn't plan on using it for a computer, they just were really interested in the physics. And then somebody found a clever application, and we started building computers, and now we all have phones in our pockets that are doing absolutely amazing things. And the laser is no different. We have thousands of applications for lasers, and it certainly wasn't to make a Blu-ray player, right? But we have this as a result. So how all this applies to what we do, I get the question a lot, what are we going to get? What is the return on investment for the kind of science that we do as a community? And the answer is, I don't have a clue. But I know it's going to be super cool, and it's going to be unexpected. And that's why we do what we do, because we're curious, and later there's going to be an application that is just going to absolutely change society fundamentally. Okay, so enough about that. So then I quit doing that and then joined the Navy. In fact, to be in the Navy, there's a very strict cutoff if you want to be a pilot in terms of age. And so I just barely made that. I flew P-3s, which is anti-submarine warfare. But in fact, of course, doing this in early, mid-2000s, there weren't a lot of subs to be tracking. But we found ourselves often in settings where we could use the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets on the P-3. So overland Iraq, initially when the war first started, which really tended to put life in perspective when you're communicating with Marines on the ground who haven't slept in 72 hours, and you've got to be the one to relay the bad news that I know you want to bed down right there, but you can't. There's bad guys right over the hill, and this asset allowed us to do that and to help out in the effort there. And then, in fact, we were in Japan when the tsunami in late 2004 hit. And so we were flying, using the assets again in the same way to find people who hadn't yet to be discovered and rescued there in Sumatra. So flying missions there. So that's what we use these assets for. And then, not to shake your confidence in the government, but they decided to let me fly a bunch of other things. And I went to test pilot school and got to fly a ton of different things. And then finally, I was in Seattle, and I just saw the P-8 on the Boeing video that was just shown while we were eating lunch. I was the lead test pilot on the P-8, which is now going to be the successor, or is the successor to the P-3. And we accepted those and bought them on behalf of the government out in Seattle. And then I quit doing that, and I started a company with a buddy of mine. We build single photon detectors, which is not the kind of physics I ever did. But he trusted me enough to read a manual and to start playing with some university instruments that I probably shouldn't have been signed off on playing with. But we build these single photon detectors, which are right now used primarily in academia for fundamental quantum optics measurements and studies. Again, no direct application. However, the thought is that this kind of technology is what's going to revolutionize computing. So the difference between where we are now and where we were 60 years ago in terms of computing is expected to be the same jump that we're going to make when we start with quantum computing. And these kind of ideas and detectors will be useful there. Also useful in the arena of quantum cryptography. So we can keep our messages secret, because right now all of those messages are being sifted and kept by the bad guys, right? But they just don't have a computer fast enough to decode them. It's going to take them 100 years with today's computing. As soon as we have a quantum computer, everything is going to be open source. So if we can encrypt it using quantum mechanics, then we're right back where we started, where we can keep our messages safe. Okay, so then quite unexpectedly, I got a phone call to come down to Houston. That was 3 years ago this summer. And in fact, when I was dating my wife, when we were in Chicago, 17 years ago now, I told her, I said, hey, look, you don't need to worry about this. I'm going to apply for this job, but it's not going to happen. But I'd be interested in doing it someday. And she's from Michigan, and she turned to me and she said, if you ever drag me to Houston, Texas, I get a pool. So the true story is I got a phone call, and I picked up the phone, and I'm in Michigan, just at University of Michigan on campus there, and I answer it, and the call goes this way. It's, hey Josh, this is Janet Cavandi, Director of Flight Crew Operations. How'd you like to come down to Houston and be an astronaut? And apparently my response was, oh crap. And she said, excuse me? And I said, I can't afford a pool. And she said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So in fact, my kids, they've got a pool, but they are going to pay their way through college. So this is our class. This is the 8 balls. What's really cool about this slide is that we come from all different places. You know, far left is Nick Haig. He's our Air Force flight test engineer. Next to him is Drew Morgan. He's a medical doctor in the Army who had supported Special Forces operations. Then Jessica Meir, who's our physiologist who looked at the compensation schemes from penguins and geese. And then Christina Hammock, who's kind of our Mark Watney that we talked about earlier. She's our electrical engineer, and she will help you if you have any trouble with your cable. Nicole Mann, she's a Marine Corps F-18 test pilot, and was actually she was one of the outgoing students when I came back on to the Navy Test Pilot School as an instructor. So we've known each other for a while. And next to me is my great friend Ann McLean, Army helicopter pilot, and then Victor Glover, F-18 Navy test pilot. So kind of coming from science, from flight test, from operational, coming from all over the place. So 3 years ago, we started our initial training that we continue today. But now today we have to keep doing the training and getting better, but we also have a ground job that we do on the side. Okay, so we got to get to know our vehicle. That was the number one thing we needed to understand. You know, now the mission is typically a 6-month duration on space station. Although I heard there was a guy who missed his return flight and was up there for almost a year. But we need to know this vehicle just like we know our jet. We need to know the electrical generation system. We need to know about the cooling, whether it be internal or external, the communications, the computers, so that we can respond when things go off nominal, as we say. A lot of the station, the vast majority of the station can be controlled from the ground, but there are those times when there's nothing the ground can help us with, and we need to execute the procedures up there. So we need to know the station to start. And so extensive training here. These are just some cool pictures of my classmates. The one on the right, I truly enjoy because that's the cool thing about NASA. They make everything look cool, even if you're holding a bucket full of number 2. Right, that is the toilet, right? And like we talked about earlier today, it is critical to being able to do the science, is to be able to live and not have the science degraded by just being human. We also were trained extensively in robotics. Of course, we use the Canadarm for grappling a visiting vehicle or positioning a spacewalker, somebody who's out doing an EVA, into a spot that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get into, or just moving big pieces of gear around. So you can see there's Karen Nyberg, depending on your perspective, hanging upside down in the cupola, working the robotic arm. This is the one I wasn't sure how it was going to go. We need to learn Russian language, and we all did in our first couple years. Well, I've got an instructor who may debate that, but I've learned enough to be dangerous. And all this says is, why do we speak Russian? And the reason is because we are a crew. And as you've learned already up to this point, or the station is the big segment of is the USOS segment, and then we've got the Russian segment. And so we need to be able to work together cohesively as a crew. Whether we're dealing with an emergency, of course, that's the primary reason. But of course, it's critical to crew cohesion and getting along if we can share the same language. In addition, we need to know the language because right now, today, our only way to get to the space station is on the Russian Soyuz. And this is a shameless plug for my friend Kate Rubens, who just launched last week at a Kazakhstan. And this picture is the reason why I wasn't able to even get started on this talk until I was on the flight to San Diego, because I was able to be out there and escort her family and take care of embarrassing myself in a second language so they didn't have to do it. But it is, I can't tell you how cool it is, and Greg can speak to this, just to see a rocket go up that's got your great friend on it. And I'm sure this audience in particular is very excited because she is really fired up to do some science for you guys. And she probably already has, she just hasn't told you yet. So we also train in uncomfortable situations. We call it expeditionary training. It's kind of just finding yourself in a spot that you otherwise wouldn't be if you just used Marriott points to get there. But you're in an uncomfortable situation, but you still got to get the mission done, and you need to be able to get along. So this is our group. When we first started at NASA, we went up to the Navy survival school, which I had actually visited, on the business end, 10, 13 years prior. And it was interesting when we rolled in. So it's called SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. When we did it, it was S, it was survival. But the rest of that is the training that you'd fall back on if you ended up getting captured in wartime. And I remember we showed up with the NASA class for this training, and I remember seeing a guy who introduced himself, and I said, "Boy, I remember you, and you weren't nearly this kind to me 13 years ago." I will never forget that face. So we did the survival training for a couple weeks up in Maine. We also, as an office, do various different missions. This is NEMO, our underwater habitat that's located off the Keys. We've got a group down there right now. They're going to be there for 3 weeks this summer. And then we also do Caves, which is in Sardinia. Again, same kind of idea that we're training people to kind of be in this uncomfortable situation. I was asked yesterday by one of the parents, to kind of explain even more why exactly do we do this expeditionary training. And to be honest, it's training to not be a jerk, right? Which some people take better to than others. But it's just how are we going to get along? Because you can imagine after 6 months or 12 months on orbit, these things tend to be very critical, and things that you don't think are important right now become paramount when you're away from home for quite a while. The other part of our training that takes up a lot of time, not that we complain about it, is flying the T-38. T-38 is the only thing, in fact, that we do in our training that is not simulated. Everything else we do, if we mess it up, we can go ahead and debrief it and talk about it and not make that mistake the next time. This one, if we mess it up, we're going to pay for it. And it's amazing how applicable these skills are, this idea of prioritizing quickly what the issue is and coming up with the definitive and right answer at that moment. And also the communications, the pithy and effective communication that we use cockpit to cockpit and jet to jet is very analogous to what we do on station. Of course, training for spacewalks. We all went through this process when we first got there. It's not unlike your house. Things break, but a little bit different than home. We're only pretending like we're upset that something broke. Everyone's looking for the excuse to go out the door. We've trained too long and too hard to not get that opportunity. So when things break, I know everyone here is frustrated, but everyone up on orbit is trying to hide their smiles, I'm sure. Where do we do that? We do that in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab is this giant pool that's located just a couple miles north of the Johnson Space Center. I'm told it's the largest indoor body of water on the planet. It's 200 feet by 100 feet by 40 feet deep. And we can't fit the whole station in there, but we've got mock-ups of essentially the majority of it. It's not all continuous, so you kind of have to pretend that you make this quantum leap from one spot to another spot and continue your work and continue your translation. It has its limitations. We're in the pool. We're in an actual EMU, an actual spacesuit, and we've got an army of divers that are, one, keeping us safe, and then a couple that are tweaking the weights that they hang on our suit to make sure that the suit stays neutrally buoyant in the water column, which is, as I understand, the absolute best training that we could possibly find to do the real thing. But of course, some of the limitations are, if I go inverted, the suit may still be neutrally buoyant, but I'm not inside the suit. So I'll be resting on my shoulders, which can be an issue sometimes. And things like moving in incredibly massive ORUs, or big boxes, that is incredibly hard in the pool to get started and very easy to stop it on a dime in the pool. You can imagine in space it's the other problem. You can get it going in a hurry and you might just send yourself into a retrograde if you get it moving too fast when you try to stop it. This video is my buddy Reed, who did his first spacewalk back in 2014. I think he's got a really cool perspective on doing spacewalks. This is after his first time out the door. And at the beginning, pay particular attention to what he says about what he expected when he opened up the hatch and was ready to go out.
And Airlock Houston, you have a go for step 10. You have you back.
I certainly didn't want to let go. But the thing that I will remember the most about yesterday, just the very first impression I had, is I opened the hatch just the way I was pointing. I had to open the hatch while Alex was working some of our oxygen controls back here. And so as I got that hatch open back there, the Earth below us it was nighttime, but the Earth was illuminated by the moon really well. So I could see the clouds rushing by. And as I opened that hatch, as a human being, I saw the darkness, and I felt like there should have been this cold air draft coming in.
I'm really excited for you to get out here and I'm ready to.
We'd like you to read the MDM label number found to us.
External feather on the interior cable bag on frame hotel. That's 440 for 240, so 2 meters to go. Alright, put your start ramping out just for a second. 1 meter to go. Now, it's showing about 60 meters per centimeters. Go. Fine.
Okay, so that's how we get ready and stay ready to fly in space. But why do we have the station, right? This has been the topic of the week. right? And from my perspective, we have the space station for two reasons. One, to get very, very good at long-duration spaceflight. If we don't get it, if we don't solve all the problems, we're not going to make it past low Earth orbit. We can't move beyond where we are now if we don't get incredibly good at it, and we are. And then secondly, we do the science. We do incredibly interesting science, some of it with a direct application, some without, but regardless, that's why we're there. It's a national lab that allows us to continue to get smart on how to live there. This is Kevin Ford working on what we call the ARED, which is the equivalent of lifting weights without weights. We now work out 2 hours a day when we're on orbit, mostly because we're incredibly lazy for the other 22. The bones in your body only need to be as strong as they need to be. And so without this kind of workout regimen, we are losing upwards of 2% of our bone mass every month. Now that we're doing this, we're less than 0.5%. Of course, you guys know this guy and Chell. We're in the business of at least proving that we can grow food and eat it. And then, of course, you're familiar with some of the studies on ocular health. We know that about 20% of astronauts have an issue with their ocular health, and we're trying to understand exactly why. But beyond the living on station and living in space issues, indulge me a little bit. I'll hit a couple sciencey things that at the moment are the ones that I'm really interested in. This one, of course, biased because it just flew, and by it I mean Kate and the hardware. So Kate is expected to do the first DNA sequencing in space. So she is going to be sequencing a ground-prepared sample, and then, provided that works great, of course, the next stage is collecting and prepping a sample on orbit. And with the eventual plan, and she's telling me this is a game changer, I believe her, the eventual plan is so that we can do things like environmental monitoring, or we can do fundamental research, whether it be on humans or animals or microbes or plants. And then we've also got this idea of on-orbit medical applications real time. And there's even talk of kind of incorporating, or first testing and then incorporating this kind of technology into robotic missions that go to, say, Mars next and do DNA sequencing on Mars, which, again, as a physicist, I'm not quite as excited about because I don't understand the ramifications, but I know this room certainly does, so I'll be excited with you for sure. This one afforded me a little bit of latitude. I love this one. Box here is intimately familiar with this one. This is the alpha magnetic spectrometer. It flew on STS-134. And this one's fascinating to me because in the 92-94 time frame, there was a project in Texas that was called the Superconducting Super Collider. And it was going to be the cutting edge of high energy physics for decades. And the SSC was canceled a couple times. They turned it back on briefly, and then it was canceled. And this absolutely crushed me. Yeah, I was in college, and everything is more dramatic when you're in college. But this one bothered me because of the fundamental decisions that were made and what the rationale was. And the rationale was that the SSC was over budget, which it turns out, my understanding is, it was slightly over budget, and it's only because it was underfunded for years, so that just kind of drug out the program. I'm sure we're all very familiar with this phenomenon. And then the one that really killed me is the congressman who said, we've got a lot of money going to Texas. There are 2 programs going on in Texas, and we're going to have to get rid of one of them. And I see how we're going to understand more about the universe with this thing called the International Space Station, but I don't understand how a collider is going to help us. And so in poetic justice, Sam Ting, a Nobel laureate physicist, proposes the alpha magnetic spectrometer, which is, he did high energy physics for the first half of his career. And then he threw this up there, which is this experiment is essentially sifting cosmic rays continuously. The idea is to answer one or both of 2 very fundamental questions. What is antimatter, where is antimatter and what is dark matter? We know that there should be an abundance of antimatter. The Big Bang says that we should have equal amounts of matter and antimatter, and we've got matter everywhere, but we're just not seeing the antimatter. So what this is doing is it's looking for that source. Maybe it's an entire antimatter universe somewhere. The other separate issue is dark matter. Some of the most promising theories on dark matter suggest that the signature will be positrons, extra positrons where we don't expect them. Positron is just the antiparticle to our familiar electron. So this is the cool thing that happened 2 years ago. So I'll get excited about DNA sequencing if you guys get excited about this. So this is essentially a plot of the relative fraction of positrons versus electrons. And as we expect, at higher energy initially, we start getting fewer and fewer positrons. That makes perfect sense. But what happens is that at a certain energy window, we start getting an excess of positrons. So that means above one energy and below another energy, there's some new physics. It might be dark matter, might not, but regardless, it's a bump. And high energy physicists, at least experimentalists, get very excited about bumps because that means there is something out there. And this is how we find new particles or answer very fundamental questions. So this is their exciting data that I'm following closely. And of course, we're working hard to keep the AMS alive. Just a quick note, this is an expensive project, right? Big science tends to be. The International Space Station tends to be. And, that's kind of the toll for doing absolutely amazing things that individuals can't do. And in fact, we spent as much on the superconducting superglider as we have on the AMS. And then we canceled it. And in fact, we could have completed the superconducting supercollider for the same cost as the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, where we discovered the Higgs boson just a couple years ago. We could have completed it for the exact same cost, 10 years earlier, at 3 times the energy. So it just kind of all comes back together. For me, we need to be smart with our money, but big money on things like the ISS, allow us to do absolutely incredible things when we all work together. Here's one that's coming to a space station near you next summer. It was super cool. I met Anita. I don't know if Anita's out there, but I met her last night, and we got to geek out a little bit about the Cold Atom Lab from NASA, JPL, Caltech. No kidding, the coldest spot in the universe. So why is this important? Why is studying quantum gases at ultra cold temperatures, why is that important? One of the great analogies that I heard from one of her colleagues was heat tends to obscure nature in very much the same way that noise obscures music, right? We can't understand the fundamental interactions of the universe if things are too hot and too warm. So we're doing this kind of stuff terrestrially, but the microgravity environment allows us to do absolutely amazing things. So the first thing we do is we've got this gas of atoms, and we park it in one spot. We use lasers from multiple directions, and we make it kind of just stop moving, which is what temperature is, right? And then the next step is to kind of, I guess it's the equivalent of blowing on a cup of coffee, right? We use this process of using an RF field to kind of just knock off the higher energy atoms. And then finally, we do adiabatic expansion. So we squish it down and then turn off the field, and in that expansion, it cools down even more. So what we could achieve at the kind of nanokelvin level, we're going to be now at the picokelvin level on orbit, because that holding it in place thing is not as hard in microgravity as it is here. Here, we release it. It took some energy to hold it there without falling to the bottom of the detector, and we release it, and it starts falling. We don't have this issue, at least to the extent on orbit that we do here. So the interaction time of being able to watch what happens with this gas is going to be extended significantly on this experiment. And so why is this cool? It's this idea of a Bose-Einstein condensate, which just means we've got a bunch of atoms that are doing their own thing, but when it gets cold enough, these atoms, due to quantum mechanics, stop working as individuals, and they start doing the exact same thing in concert, just like dancers in a chorus line, doing everything perfectly in unison. So what we end up with is a quantum mechanical system that is macroscopic. We can watch quantum mechanics happen, and it's only possible at incredibly cold temperatures. So here's one that I'm excited about. Okay, so that was more cable channels. What are we doing next? So commercial crew, right? We're going to start launching domestically here as soon as 2017. We've got 2 contracts out, one to Boeing and one to SpaceX. Both will, after initial flight test, will execute somewhere between 2 and 6 operational missions to the space station. We'll continue to fly out of Kazakhstan as well. The rate will probably drop down a little bit, but so we'll have 3 different ways of getting to the space station. And why are we doing that? Because, oh, I'm sorry, before we get to that, this game has changed. I think you saw this earlier this week when I wasn't able to make it. Right, this game is changing significantly. We're now kind of at the spot where we're landing the first stages. These guys did it as well. And like I like to say, when nerds are getting very excited, something very cool is happening, right? And this is it, right? This is completely fundamentally changing the cost of what we do, hopefully. So why are we doing that? It's so that NASA can focus on the deep space, the next step. We flew EFT-1, which is the first test article that we launched of Orion. We launched that on a Delta IV Heavy in late 2014. And next up is what we call EM-1, which again is a uncrewed vehicle, but it's going to be on top of the SLS, our NASA giant rocket. And it's going to be about a 3-week mission. We're going to orbit the moon for about 6 days and then come on back. And then after that, kind of the 2023 regime, right when I'm ready to go, we're going to launch EM2, which is going to be our first crewed vehicle of Orion. And so this is a cool video about EM1 that again is upcoming. It's going to be 2 years from now, about fall 2018. And what I like about this video is it proves and shows you that this is not some esoteric theoretical idea. There is hardware interspersed, of course, with graphics, but you will see actual hardware that we are getting ready to launch. videos that give goosebumps. I love it. So in closing, I'd like to finish with a quote that maybe isn't really well known, but it's one of my favorites. Robert Wilson was the director of Fermilab, this collider that I was talking about where I did my research. He was the first director, and in the late 60s he was called to testify in front of Congress. And you can imagine in kind of the 1969 time frame what everybody was focused on. And he repeatedly was asked how the work at Fermilab was going to contribute to national security. And he repeatedly answered, it's not. It's not going to do anything specifically. And they kept on him and on him and on him. And finally he responded, it has nothing to do directly with defending our country, except to make it worth defending. And for me, that's why we do any of this. It's to be curious, and we'll find applications later. We'll have direct applications later, but for right now, being curious and doing the science is why I'm a part of this. And I'll tell you, I'm completely honored to potentially have a role to be your eyes and ears and hands on orbit doing these experiments. And you know, let's be honest, we've got a national asset there. We've got a national lab that's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most of the data is being collected while we're asleep. The crew might complain a little bit from time to time about the long hours, but you can usually make that go away by giving them free food. You know, when something breaks, they work really hard to try to fix it, usually don't make it any worse. And you know, finally, we don't shower. So if that isn't the greatest definition of America's grad students, I've never heard it. So we are excited to be with you and do some absolutely incredible things. I've got a video that I think was just added in the first rule of public speaking. I'm about to break. I have no idea what she says, but it's Kate Rubins who sent down a video with Jeff Williams, and I think that follows here. And then after that, we can take some Q&A if that works. Do I need to push it again, Tom? Thanks, man.
The unique environment of microgravity provides unmatched opportunities to look at old questions in new ways and to discover new questions. Much of the research we are doing relates to the human body and getting humankind deeper into space. Leaving Earth orbit for extended periods isn't going to be easy, so we need to continue advancing science and driving innovation. Station provides the platform to do just that. Whether we're improving upon existing research or making brand new discoveries, working on the ISS gives us new opportunities each and every day.
Thank you for joining us at the ISS Research and Development Conference this year. NASA and CASIS continue to bring on board new and exciting experiments at an increased pace. Your orbiting laboratory is just a launch away. I really look forward to seeing some of your work up here soon.
That's awesome. Thank you. So this morning I got to do an intro for a ham radio event with Jeff, and he did obviously Q&A with some elementary kids, elementary school kids, but all of his questions were vetted. He knew every question before it came, so I'm going to suffer the pain of being a junior guy in the office. None of you people have been vetted, but I'm certainly interested in any questions that you have that I can potentially answer, or I might even defer some here to Box. But what I'll do is, if it's okay, because you can't work 24 hours a day, I've got some video of guys just kind of messing around, and we'll just play that in the background while we do Q&A, if that's cool. Although this tends to stifle questions because people just want to see them. I have it on a loop, so it'll come back. So if you have a question, please, I think we have mics out there, right? Okay.
My name is John Creech, Science Communications at CASIS.
At CASIS?
Yes, sir. I was just curious if you get motion sickness on a boat, seasick.
Uh-huh.
How is that, like, if you're really susceptible to that, how does that play out in microgravity?
Yeah, so my understanding is that that you can be a tough guy in a jet and never get sick, or maybe in the boat, but it sometimes has no relevance to how you're going to feel on orbit. So I think it's a crapshoot. Some people get sick, some people don't. I asked that question to Kate when she called me. She had been on orbit for about a half hour. I'm not going to let you know what the answer is.
How many years have you been working with NASA?
Wow, is that God? Where did you come from? Oh, there you are. I see you. I'm sorry, you got blinded. I'm sorry. Say it again.
How many years have you been working with NASA?
3 years now. Although when I was in college, I did an internship at the Marshall Space Flight Center for about 2 months. But I've been here in this job for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
What's your name?
Brady.
Brady, how old are you?
8.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming. What's your favorite subject?
Science.
Yeah, there we go. Whether it was true or not, he knows his audience.
You have to sit here and do it like this. Not that you're either.
Mike Skidmore, NASA Ames Research Center.
Hi.
I'm an old P3 driver, and I'd love to talk to you about the P8.
Okay. Great.
But I wanted to ask questions about the vehicles that you'll be riding up and down. So the Russian vehicle, the 2 U.S. vehicles.
Yep.
About the load factors in both. What's the ride like going up, and what's the impact coming down? I've worked with the Russians, so I know there can be some pretty hard landings in the Soyuz.
Yeah,
vehicle.
but proven and effective. My understanding is coming down, it looks kind of like a car crash from the outside, and from the inside, it feels kind of like a car crash. But it works, right? It's a beautiful system, proven, launched thousands and thousands of times. The nice thing about flying in space is you're on your back. So the G's that we're used to in an aircraft, they're kind of pulling the blood from your head and down and making you a little less smart than when you started. It's more eyeballs in kind of G's, at least on the accelerations. But to give you numbers, I'm sorry. I'll let you know. Give me a shout, and I'll let you know how the ride was up there.
Hello, I'm Anna Sophia, and I was wondering...
I know you.
Yeah. I was wondering what you would tell a student who wants to be an astronaut, like one piece of advice or like 10 pieces of advice. I'll stand here and take as much advice.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No.
2 pieces of advice. For me, it's number 1, primarily, do what you love. Absolutely do what you love. Don't try to build a resume that seems to fit and be this perfect match, because there are too many people who I think do that and aren't truly happy with what would be the plan B. And let's be honest, it's like playing the lottery, right? You can't win if you don't buy a ticket, but you better have a different retirement plan, right? And that's the other piece of it. Just be lucky. I mean, I'm here because I'm incredibly fortunate to be a part of this, and got to do things that I loved before I got here, and obviously this is pretty awesome too. I think we have time for one more. Okay.
Dmitry Stradubov from San Diego. How much G you think as a physicist is enough to wipe out the effects of microgravity on the human physiology? 0.1 G, milli G?
Oh, I see. How much would we need to artificially create? That, unfortunately, is a question that I probably can't speak to as a physicist. I think maybe some of the people who do physiology could probably speak to that a little better than me. But, of course, our bodies are designed for 1G. So my assumption is that the human organism is going to want to return back to 1G to function properly. But, of course, I can't speak to the details. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this. Thanks.